All right, super. All right, well, thanks for taking the time to meet.
No problem.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So just to let you know, I looked at your lesson plan. So thank you for turning those in on time. You got 87%. Yes, you do. You and Miss Hooper got 87%. Turn them in on time. So that's
Good.
super. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, one day, I don't know what happened. I think I was sick that night, and I woke up like, oh snap, it's Friday. I forgot. And I like pressed send at like 7 a.m. But yeah.
It worked. It worked. I'm going to give you this form. So as we're talking, it's just the type of feedback form we can use to track notes on what's going on, the next steps.
Okay.
Okay. So to first get us started, I want to commend you. On the lesson plan, it said that you were building on combining what we have learned with drawing faces and landscapes. So I did see the ellipse lesson, and so I think it's good that you're building on and you're adding to it. What data did you see that showed the kids were ready to move ahead into the storyboard?
One, just their projects that they've been doing. So a lot of the finished portraits for the grid method and a lot of the perspective projects, they've shown that they have a great understanding when it comes to drawing it. During the test, they showed that they were nervous to take the test. Not that they didn't understand it, it was just, oh snap, it's a test, I don't know what to do. However, when I asked them to draw it and name me the steps, they're able to understand everything, and that was similar to the exit ticket that we did as a group together. So yeah, they were able to show me that they understood what's happening, they were able to apply it, and I was like, okay guys, we did the hard part. Now the easy part is doing it on a smaller scale and doing it all together.
Okay.
So yeah.
So one thing I did want to ask you about was the standards. I know in our performance world, standards are different than, say, a Common Core standard that has many discrete skills wrapped in it. So if we can take a look at the 3 standards that you have, so these seem pretty broad. So when you're making a lesson plan, let's consider what specific part of a standard the kids would master within that lesson.
Okay, so I had a feeling you was going to ask this, and I'm glad you did. So the standard 4 is really for AP.
Okay.
So I should probably make that green next time. These 2 here, so because our projects are like a week long, the standards kind of change throughout what part of the lesson we're on.
Sure.
So for example, to organize and develop the idea, that will mainly start in the beginning. So if we're doing the storyboarding, okay, I need you to organize this idea first, plan it out first. What does that look like? So in the beginning of the packet, I don't think you saw that. Let's see what I have here. In one of our beginning packets, I had all the students first create a character and then develop that character first. So what is he going to look like? What is his name? What is his alter ego? What are the abilities, the backstory? So all of that is the planning and organizing or developing section.
Okay.
Now when it comes to actually creating this comic strip or this storyboard, so now we have to refine and complete what we've just been working on. So yeah, like you said, everything's just building upon what we've done before. So I wasn't sure if I should just do one standard because it's kind of developing over time, or should I just implement more than one?
No, and I think it sounds like they're very connected, and they both align with your assessment rubric for the storyboard. But what I would consider doing, since you have it broken down here, perhaps you can have another box in here. You can keep the standards up here, but for specifically on Monday, let's take a look at this beginning standard.
Standards too.
At the end of that day, based on the student work, what specifically do you want to see? Do you want to see the organization, or do you want to see the development, or do you want to see them brainstorming ideas?
Okay.
So if we were to talk about the lesson from yesterday, which part of that standard do you think would most closely align?
2. It's still organizing and developing.
Okay, so organizing and developing. And then what I would push you to consider is what assessment would you use? Or as you're walking around and they're doing the work, what are you specifically looking for that's connected to organizing and developing?
So yeah, that would come from what's your storyline? What's happening here? So what is your plan for this story? So if they're still saying, I don't really know what I want to do, then I'm like, okay, you guys are still organizing your thoughts. But if they're able to say, okay, this is my story, this is what I'm thinking, I want it to be a drama, and this is what's happening, now I'm like, okay, that's my assessment for just this day. So you're showing me that, okay, you're building off of that idea that you want, now you're able to implement the different drawings involved as well.
Absolutely, and
I think it's a great idea to implement it here.
the other thing that you can do, what you just talked about, so let's say we're walking around and somebody does show mastery. Let's just say it's a good day for Ahmed. And he's mastered organizing and developing, like he's able to articulate to you a complex plot. Maybe you can push him a little bit further, so maybe scripting some answers that you can push him to. All right, let's just refine that character, or let's refine that next step, versus somebody that might be struggling in your class. Then you would know what are some questions I can say to help that student organize and develop their thought. So everything you're doing in this lesson is focused on that discrete component of the standard.
Right.
So how do you think that might help instruction versus having all 3 standards for 1 week, having specific standards for each day?
I think it'll help them really understand that this is our focus. Like you said, it will help them dig deeper and to continue to articulate those thoughts that they have.
How will it help you with planning?
I love it here, what you were saying. I think it'll help me stay a little bit more focused too on what the actual end goal is, and actually putting the grade in the grade book. What exactly am I grading? Am I just grading for completion? And the completion shows understanding, but now it's like, okay, I'm able to ask those specific questions that I want, again, to go back to what our end goal is.
Excellent, great, good. So let's connect the dots a little bit more. So talking about what you wanted the kids to do during their independent practice, based on your lesson plan, it looked like there was 2 different goals you had. That's on this page. So talking about stick figures into form, and then drawing buildings using perspective. So what I want to do is just pull up a portion of the video of your class.
Okay.
I think it might be helpful to look at the language that we're giving them when you're releasing them to do this task. Now, based on what they were doing in the class, how much did you want to see them working on these 2 aspects?
That was just going to be implemented. That wasn't the main focus.
Meaning what?
So, because again we're developing this over time, our schedule is a little off, so this wasn't necessarily for Tuesday, if that makes sense.
It does.
So let me see.
Especially with Monday's data talk day.
Yeah, so we kind of got to adjust it a little bit. Let's see. Google today. So yeah, we're more so here. So this came from mainly, so I had a student today developing that background of the entire image too. So not just, okay, I'm just drawing a stick figure here, I'm developing the entire image. So one question I kept asking them back and forth as well, and I'm glad I was able to develop that during the classroom, so I'm going to implement it next time in the lesson plan as well, is to ask the question of, okay, if this was an actual movie, do we want the entire background to be white and only just see 2 people just on the screen, or do we want some life happening in the background? Where is it taking place? Is it at someone's home? Is it in the library? Is it outside? I need to actually see that. So again, we learned the landscapes, we learned the buildings, we learned the cityscapes. Involve that in the image first, and then when it comes to drawing figures, let them be in perspective based off what the building is doing.
Okay. So it sounds like there's 2 different things that you're looking for. That first one talking about the landscaping and perspectives, and then building onto that with the stick figures. So we're going to watch, it's only probably 20 seconds,
That's
but
fine.
think in the framework of the directions you're giving to the kids to help them reach the goals of what you want to be looking for.
Up first. On the next 3 pages of this package, alright? On the next 3 pages of this package are a bunch of blank pages that look very similar to what you see on the screen. Alright? Again, there are 3 pages of each one long story. It can be one story with 3 different episodes. It could be 3 completely different stories. Alright? It's completely up to you. But I want you to be as creative as possible. This is going to be your rough draft for your final piece of this. Alright? Again, this is going to be the rough draft to the final piece of this. Alright? So you guys may begin. Again, plan it out first. One second. On the back of the first page is also an example of what this comic strip looks like, what the storyboard looks like. Alright? It's an example of me teaching it. You guys trying to figure out which one you do. You're going on past there. Pay attention to how small these boxes are. Go on.
take a look at the language that you gave the kids when you were giving the directions, plus the learning goals you had for them.
Okay.
Do you see a gap between what you were asking the students to do versus what you wanted to see?
Yeah, I was kind of saying it as if they already knew what the expectations were, versus actually saying, okay, I want the entire box filled up. And I think I was so sold on it being a draft as well, versus what the final piece would look like. So I think this is excellent timing to bring this in now, so now I can actually say, okay, for the final draft, this is what I want.
Great. So even though they're working on a draft, you still want them to be having those elements that you'll be assessing that align back to that standard. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at that work, you can say, okay, there's a landscape, there's a perspective, the stick figures are into form, and then you can go back, all the way back to your objectives and say, they are able to organize and develop their ideas. They're able to refine. As you mentioned, it's a draft, so this would be done over time versus the more immediacy of you looking for how they're doing. Okay? So let's move on to the next part of the lesson. So we've identified being a little bit more deliberate in directions. So let's practice what that would look like. If you were to reteach that part of the lesson, some of the things that you did tell them, you told them to plan with an end goal. You told them what they needed to do for a draft, but what type of language could you say in your directions that would be more aligned with the skills you want to see?
So make sure you implement a foreground, middle ground, and background.
Okay, good.
And I'll explain again that the background should have whatever scenery is taking place, so the perspectives that we learned. The foreground should be whether it's people or whatever you want to really happen inside the piece. And then I'll say either, and it's gonna go back and forth, either the middle ground or the foreground, and I will go back to the different camera shots as well.
Okay.
And I'll say, okay, the establishing shot should show the perspective. And even here, how it's white space around it. Yes, we're focused on what kind of shot it is, but the white space around it needs to have this back here as well.
Great. So you're using these more relevant to this specific skill.
Right,
So it's not just the full shot, but what's about the background and what about the landscape? Okay, great, good. So when you were monitoring the kids, when you were walking around, were you looking for these specific aspects, or were you more looking for them just to get started on the story?
I was really looking to see what their ideas were.
Okay.
So I think the more, especially with any type of creative field, the more you talk about, okay, what do you want to do? What is your vision? What is your goal? What story do you want to tell? They're able to really buy into it, I feel like. And a lot of them were like, either I kind of know what I want to do, but I'm not really sure. But others were so sold on their stories that they were just like kind of going on with it. And I really, my goal anyway for art is I want to introduce them to different type of career fields that we have. And I feel like a lot of them are like, wow, I can really be a television producer. Or I had another student, Miss Berry. She wanted to take hers home because she had wrote a paper last year that she actually wanted to make a story out of. And she was like, now I can make it visual. And I was like, just imagine you keep building onto this. This is not something you should throw away. Just like the paper that she had last year. So that was my main goal, just to see how they were thinking, how they were creating, and just to see how excited they were to actually do it.
Right.
And then building off of that, or just, like I said, just being a guide to say, okay, we're kind of stuck here, but here's some ideas. So what if, it was a type of a drama and someone got lost while they were walking, you know what I mean? So just something from like, wow, I would actually go watch that. So let me write about it. So yeah, and like you said, implementing some writing involved as well.
You did a nice job with the student in the back when you asked her the question, well, if you're just going to be doing the same dance, is that something you want to see? She's like, yeah. Well, is that something somebody else will want to see? Well, probably not. So I like the way you phrased your questions to get her to answer.
Right.
So that was well done. So thinking about putting all of this together, if we see kind of a gap between the directions you're giving the students and what you want them to do, is there an upcoming lesson, or I guess they're still working on this assignment today? Or is it something else?
Today was the last in-class day to do it. They
Okay.
have this weekend to finish it. But like I said, the final draft will look similar to the poster that's on the wall. And I'll take it off the wall and walk around with it just to say what my expectations are. But just so they know it's a clean, finalized image. It's going to be on a bigger paper. So they need to find whatever scenes they want to focus on. So yeah, I'll have to really make an elaborate rubric for this with like different steps. 1 and 2, the reasons why we're doing these steps, maybe a reference to, okay, here's some terminology we've already learned.
Right.
Here's a lot of other stuff we learned, so don't feel overwhelmed. The stuff we already learned, this is how you should implement it. And here's my guide is a step-by-step process on how you should do it. But yeah, and like I said, I think it'd be great to have physical examples. Again, they're using this as a draft so they can do the entire story if they want to, or they can just kind of pick and choose which ones were the strongest ones. And I think I want to do some type of table collaboration with them as well. So it's almost like they're pitching their stories to each other. Okay, which one do you think I should do? Like, would you go see this in the theaters? So yeah, I think that's how I want to do it.
Excellent. So let's try to practice what that script will look like. So they're going to be revising for their final assessment, it sounds like. So you mentioned a few things that you wanted them to do. We're going to focus on the key terms. So that would mean, I would assume, going back to your lesson plan for the week and focusing on what not only these discrete terms are, but these larger picture objectives. So scripting out in your directions, perhaps. When you're looking, I'm going to be rotating around, looking for what you have in your landscape. I'm going to be looking to making sure that your stick figures are full form. And any other aspects of that rubric. So let's just practice with one direction that you would tell the students that you would want them to do.
Okay. Think about that for a second.
Go ahead. If it'll help you to write it down first and revise it, go ahead.
Alright, so and this would be for Tuesday for sure.
Right, since the next 2 days are offline.
I think I thought we didn't have school Monday. I had a due date for Monday. It was like, we don't have school. I was like, why don't we have school Monday? And of course, I'm trying to act like I already knew that.
Right, right.
I didn't know that. All right. Okay. Question.
Go.
Do you recommend, because I've been doing this lately, and I think I liked how it turned out last time, but I want to pick your brain a little bit. So I handed out a rubric for our last project. However, the projects before that, I was just handing out a rubric. And I was saying, okay, guys, I want you to read through this rubric. Another time, I was like, okay, we're going to read through it together just so I know that they're understanding what we're doing. The third time, I was like, okay, how about I have the rubric, but I have questions involved in the rubric. So they're actively reading the rubric. They're answering the questions for my expectations. And they have to turn in the rubric first that's already answered in order to start their project. I'm assuming that's what I feel like I answered my question. Okay. So I think I'm going to do the same thing again for this following project. Actually have a rubric with those questions. They have to go through it to understand what my expectations are and what aren't my expectations. And within that, I will have to clearly write out what those expectations are in a step-by-step on how to get there.
So what you probably want to do is write the response you want to see from your students. So as you've passed that out, because I think it's a great idea to have them, they're really internalizing the rubric, just like we do with our daily objective. We want them to put it in their own words, understand the meaning. So if we're passing out a rubric, and perhaps they don't understand what perspective and landscape is, that would come to light when they're trying to explain it further.
Right.
So I would recommend, as you're writing those response questions, also write the anticipated response so you know what you want to hear from the kids. And then when you go to bring it back to the directions that we're giving the students, that will give you the data to see what I need to clarify. So as you're walking around and they're writing the questions to that rubric, if you're finding the students are not answering a question on landscapes accurately, then you know you need to be very deliberate in your questioning when you're telling them what your expectations are for landscapes. Or let's say they do understand stick figures. Okay, that's something they don't have to spend so much time in my directions with.
For sure.
And the other thing you can do, like bring your collaboration idea in. So perhaps once they're writing those questions, they can turn and talk or share responses. And then maybe each table comes up with the best response that they have. That's just a way to support the collaboration you were just talking about. But I think that's a great practice. And then that will inform you to help see what directions need to be more engaged and precise and which ones that they already understand. So let's go back to that rubric. Think of one specific aspect that you're looking for in your assessment in the end project. What would be a line that you would tell the students for your directions?
Okay. What the first thing on my mind is what my expectations are.
Okay.
So I will tell them my expectations are for you guys for one specific part. is one to have great craftsmanship, so let it be as neat as possible.
Okay.
Fill in the entire page. So for example, if I gave this huge page right here, I want the entire page filled up. It's not a little tiny box, hey, Miss B, I'm done. Entire page filled up. Expectations as well. Inside of every single box, I need to add color. I need to have foreground, middle ground, and background. I need to just show those different landscapes involved. I need not only for your, and I'm saying right now, I didn't script that all the way
It's
yet.
okay, go ahead.
And not only for your scripted areas to make sense, but I need it to make sense visually as well.
Mhm. I think those are all important components. The one thing I would add to that is think of the sequence that you want. What are they going to be doing first? So what's going to be building on each other? And again, going back to what your lesson plan is, figuring out where the heaviest weight is. What do you want them to be able to master? And then the other thing, when you were just saying that, I heard of a lot of I need. It's not like you need, they need.
Right.
So in your work, be able to demonstrate, be able to show, be able to explain. So you're taking kind of your expectations off the table. They have that rubric, here's what you need to do. But I think like you just said, just scripting exactly what you want them to do. That way when they're released to do that independent work, it's more clear and more aligned with your goals.
And they're actively understanding the rubric.
Right. So what do you think the difference is between what we just talked about and the lesson from yesterday?
It'll be tangible for them. So everything I need, they can literally, and I'll have check boxes for them to check off, okay, I've done this, I've included this as well. And then they can continue to add on to their ideas, but also get exactly what we need done for it to meet the expectation.
Super. Okay. Any questions on implementing that?
No. I guess I can pick your brain one more time.
Of course.
So you see how I already have these boxes in for them? I'm thinking for the final, should I also have these boxes in for them, or should I have it blank and they draw the boxes in?
It seems like this is more procedural. Like, do we really care if they're able to draw a box? And plus you said it's a small size. So you've already made them think about scaling.
Right.
So I would be, if we're looking at, think of what your rubric's gonna show. Your rubric probably wants the idea of a plot, as you said yesterday in your handout, with just a couple of the words. So I think this will help norm what the kids are doing. I would definitely stick with this.
Okay.
I mean, as an extension, if somebody wanted to do something for extra credit or an additional project, or if you find scholars that are really well adept at this and need that extra, then you can do it.
Okay.
But I would make sure that they're showing you the data that they can effectively use this. So moving ahead, just be more mindful a little bit on the directions you're giving the students in alignment to your standard and the objective and the skills. And it sounds like you've already done that, moving ahead to what you're going to be asking for in that final project. But yeah, like I was telling you, my English class, we did Spider-Man all the time. I would take the Spider-Man and I would white out what he was saying when we were doing word choice.
Oh man.
There's a lot to be done with the storyboard.
There's so much.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much. And they really, really enjoyed the, I don't think you saw it. So it's an extra credit opportunity for them to create a flip book. And a lot of them were like, oh my gosh, this looks really cool. I just don't know if I have the patience to do it. But I was like, this is why it's extra credit.
They have online programs for this as well? Yeah.
So a lot of them have seen the movie Home Alone.
Yeah.
And that's why I kept saying everything starts off with sketch first. Everything starts off with art first.
Uh-huh.
And they're just like in awe of, wow, this is all wrong. So yeah, that'll be extra credit.
Well,
And I
that's
have a couple
great.
freshmen jumping in for it.
And you know, I almost wonder, like, if you hold them to some of the skills that they taught, that you've taught. Like, you want to see a landscape, and you want to see rounded figures. That's so fun. How many pages is that?
Exactly, right?
Was that a couple hundred, maybe?
Because it's one entire stack of note cards, and every single scene is a different stack.
Oh my god, I'm not gonna look at my index cards the same.
Every single scene is a different stack. It's crazy.
Wow. Have you created one of those before? Was that a Syracuse project?
No, actually, I did in high school. Did in high school, yeah.
All right, Ms. Butler, as always, thank you for your time. I will do my best to come and see their work. I do have a NAF site visit on Tuesday morning, but if you want to put some aside and we can critique how they're doing,
Absolutely.
all right,
And I'll work on those rubrics this week.
super. Feel free to send them to me if you need another
Yes.
set of eyes.